Hey guys, Adam here with AmericanTrucks.com. Today we obviously have something very unique in the shop with us, a 2012 Tuscany Package FTX 5-liter F150, which as you can see has a ton of exterior goodies already added to the truck from the factory. What it doesn't have, however, is anything done under the hood, completely bone stock, and that's why we're here. Later on, we'll throw a Supercharger into the mix to make some power, throw it on the dyno to see exactly how it performs, and then put this thing through a real-world test. We'll throw a trailer on the back with a Mustang strapped down inside of it, and then take this thing up a highway ramp to see how fast and easy we can get the trailer going with the added blower. And before we get into that, if you like cool builds like this and you want to see more events and builds, subscribe to our YouTube channel. But in the meantime, why don't we take a walk around this truck to see what it's got going on. So as you can see, Tuscany went all out with this exterior package. And for those of you who aren't really familiar, Tuscany teams up with Ford to make these special edition trucks directly from the factory. Now you have a few different choices from Tuscany. You have the Black Ops, the Tonka, and then obviously this one here is the FTX. All of which have a bunch of different add-ons you can pick from to kind of customize it to your liking. You either have a chrome or a blacked out look. This one obviously got the chrome touches. And it is placed just north of $80,000. Now the goal of the package is to add a layer of luxury to the pretty beefed up 5-liter F-150 from Ford. And honestly, this thing makes me think of a platinum model, but just taken to a whole other level. So the first thing you'll notice front and center are the two huge nostrils up top, which is actually a dual intake Ram Air custom FTX hood, completely replacing the factory one from Ford. This is going to be functional as well, pulling in cold air from the front through the heat extractors and pushing the hot ones out through the cowl by the windshield. This will play a huge role in keeping the engine running just a little bit cooler. So moving down the front end, you'll notice that the grille was custom painted to match the factory paint job on the truck from Ford, and it's given a couple of chrome billet grille inserts on both the top and bottom, which are a part of that custom package I mentioned earlier. In addition to that, you're retaining the Ford oval logo, of course, and of course the factory fog lights on each side under the headlights. The headlights are also not a part of this package, but these are smoked DRL headlights, which actually I think look really cool, giving it a stealthier look. Moving on to the sides here, the first thing you'll obviously notice is the massive 6-inch suspension lift from Tuscany that actually come with performance-tuned shocks from the factory to help you better with off-roading. Now capping that off is exclusive 20-inch 8-spoke chrome riveted wheels, which of course may not be for everybody, but it is a part of that chrome choice package with the opposition being blackout. Now it is also wrapped in the BF Goodrich all-terrain KO2 tires, which have that off-road tread pattern, but are also good for keeping road noise levels down. The custom molded fender flares are built for this particular package to give it a really wide body look that I actually really like. The vents here are fully functional, just like the hood, to keep the heat extracting going, with the F-150 Classic badge in chrome, of course, and the FX4 trim level there. Moving along the sides here, the door cladding is completely custom from Tuscany. Not exactly my favorite thing in the build, but it does go very well with the Tuscany package. The FTX logo is done up in chrome, as well as a couple of inserts to match the package. So the reason you don't see any side steps on this truck is actually because these are not a part of the Tuscany package. These are custom amp research automatic power steps that come out when you open the doors and close when you shut them. This way, they're there when you need them and not when you don't. This actually gives you some off-road clearance if you're doing some wheeling or going up on a rock. You don't have to worry about solid side steps rubbing up and destroying on the rock. I really love these because they do give the truck a sleek look by hiding underneath the truck, and when they come out, they're fully functional and very grippy. There's really not a whole lot different in the back compared to stock, but the one thing you will notice, of course, is the hardtop pre-painted tonneau cover that comes on the Tuscany package. I do like this simply because it does look pretty cool and it is more protective than a simple vinyl option, but the one thing it does limit is how much you can actually fit in the bed because of the angle that it opens up. So if you're trying to fit something big like a sofa, you might have a little bit of issue with that. Only other thing different here is inside the bed, you'll see a completely carpeted interior bed liner. This does add a luxury aspect to it, which ultimately was the goal with the FTX package. Now it does get a little bit dirtier, easier, and maybe a little bit harder to clean, but it does look pretty good in my personal opinion. To finish off the back, we have a set of smoked taillights to match the smoked headlights not included in the package, and then chrome-tipped split rear exit, quiet tone performance catback exhaust from Tuscany. Sounds really great, which you'll hear throughout this video. This package is pretty sweet, but like I said in the very beginning, under the hood was left completely bone stock from Tuscany, and that's where we're going to step in. So why don't we stop all the talking, get this thing on a lift, break it down, and get ready for the Supercharger. All right, guys, so we just finished the breakdown here, but before we get back into surgery, I've left you in the dark as far as what power adder we are going with. This is the Roush 2300 Phase 2 Supercharger kit, a fan favorite for the Coyote motors, right? This is a 2.3-liter TVS blower, rated from Roush about 570 horsepower, 530 foot-pounds of torque at the crank. So when we strap this string to the dyno, we're hoping to make around mid-400s, if we're lucky, high 400s, but we'll see that in a little bit. That power, by the way, should help us when we get this thing in the real-world test, strapping it to a trailer going up the highway ramp. It'll make things a lot easier on the engine, get us up the ramp quicker, and we're going to time that later on. So in addition to the root style blower, you have the upper and lower manifolds, the 47-pound injectors, 60mm twin throttle body, all of which will help to complete this kit right out of the box. Now before we get to the dyno and things of that nature, we still have a couple of things we have to work on under the hood, a little bit of clearance we need to add, so there is cutting and grinding, which I am going to leave up to my man Joe here. Joe, are you ready for that?
Let's get to it.
So let's do it. All right, guys, so we just wrapped up the cutting and grinding. The most nerve-wracking part of the installation, in my opinion. Joe handled it quite well. There's 3 bosses on the end of the block here that have to get ground down and cut off, simply to make room for the pulley and belt assembly to give it some clearance. We threw some trash bags on top to stop some of the aluminum shredding from getting into places that we don't want it to get. We'll move on to a couple other things. We have wiring to take care of, and once that's taken care of, we'll hop onto some fun stuff. We'll put the front mount intercooler radiator on and then move on to the blower assembly. So we just wrapped up the low temp rad here on the front. We've got that installed along with the brackets and even the coolant pump here on the side. Now the way this is going to work in conjunction with the manifold is the coolant from the pump is going to be flowing through these fins. The air coming through the front will cool that off, sending it to the manifold and the intercooler, and the hot stuff will be coming back and recycling through the process. Now that we've got this installed, we've got a little bit of plumbing to tackle next. Then we're going to put the fuel rails onto the manifold and intercooler, get that installed, and keep things moving. So we got the air-to-water intercooler in, also known as a heat exchanger or an aftercooler, depending on some forums you're checking out. We're going to put these bolts into place, torque them down, get some fuel delivery parts into place, the injectors, the fuel rails, then we're going to move on to the blower. So we've got the fuel rails and the injectors seated into the manifold here. The 47-pound injectors are almost double the factory size, which of course you want to do when you're adding a little bit more power with a blower application. The fuel rails are an upgrade as well from the stock ones, which can tend to be a bottleneck when you start adding more power like this. So we've got these bolts in, we're going to torque them down, then we're going to seat the blower on top here, get a little bit more plumbing, and then see what we can do on the dyno. After a pretty long and rigorous install, we got this thing strapped on the dyno with its stock wheels and tires so we can get an accurate power number. Now before we jump into that, let's talk about the stock baseline run we established earlier on, also with the stock wheels and tires and 93 octane in the tank. Made 310 horsepower at the wheels, 328 foot-pounds of torque. Pretty decent numbers, I'll admit, from the factory. Now before we get into this, I do want to mention that earlier on I was hopeful from mid-400s to high 400s as far as power and torque is concerned. And honestly, this did not disappoint. Out of the box, it's rated at 570 horsepower at the crank, and this thing made 500 horsepower at the wheels, 480 foot-pounds of torque. I am extremely impressed and actually pretty surprised with those numbers. For our peak gains, we're looking at 190 horsepower at the wheels and 152 foot-pounds of torque. Extremely impressive numbers, if I do say so myself. Now for curve gains, we're looking at 154 horsepower at the wheels and 168 foot-pounds of torque. As you can see from this graph, most of our torque, if not all of the real big gains, are here at the low end to the mid-range, which is exactly what we wanted to help us out with our on-road testing that we're about to do in just a little bit. Now what this will do is help us get off the line quicker, especially when we have a couple 1,000-pound trailer strapped to the back with a car inside of it. Before we get into that though, I want to see how this thing feels for myself out on the road. It sounded pretty healthy, but I want to get behind the wheel, so let's get to it. We finally got this thing on the road. On the dyno, sounded healthy. On the road, feels even healthier. I mean, this thing's got a lot of pull. You're going from 309 horsepower to 500, 328 foot-pounds of torque, and then moving to 480 foot-pounds of torque. This is gonna make a huge difference, I hope, when we get it up to the trailer, because that low-end torque's gonna help us get off the line a lot easier. And with the added blower, the wheels aren't humming too much. I was a little concerned about that. It'd be a little loud on the highway. Let's see what this thing can do. Listen to it, oh my God. Red line, there we go. This thing moves. The blower aside, the build from Tuscany is just flawless. The 6-inch lift, in my opinion, I would have thought would have been a little too much on the truck, but I actually think it's taking turns really well. It's reacting really well. Couldn't ask for anything better, man. This thing it's moving off the line with ease. I'm not even putting a whole lot of throttle into this thing. You can feel the torque kind of kick in when you lay into it. We did hook this up to the trailer before we put the blower on. It felt exactly what you would expect. It's a little sluggish, you know. And then going up the ramp, what we did was we have a stopwatch in the truck. We have a point where we go up the ramp at 30 miles an hour. We say go, floor it up the ramp as fast as possible, obviously as safe as possible, and then we stop at 60 miles per hour and we clocked it. Now that run without the blower took about 30 seconds, from 30 miles per hour to 60 miles per hour with the weight. Now that we got the added power, I'm gonna drive it back. We're gonna hook it up to that same exact setup. We're gonna take that same exact route, the same ramp, same amount of time, 30 to 60, see how fast we can do it. So let's get back there and hook this thing up. We got the trailer hooked up. We're on our way to the ramp at our highway so that we can test to see how much easier this blower is gonna make our lives when pulling several thousand pounds on the back. I'll have my phone here we're gonna use as a stopwatch so that we can see how long it takes us to do it now that we have the added power. Here we go. Going onto the ramp. I'm at 30 and go. Stop. So we went from 30 seconds to 21 seconds with the added power. Now 9 seconds might not sound like a lot of time, but going from 30 to 60 with thousands of pounds on the back can be a tough task. 30 seconds to get that up is a pretty long time to get up an entrance ramp. I'm super impressed with that. I actually was not as sure what to expect. Obviously this is not an exact science, so it's about 9 seconds. With the trailer, it feels so much easier to pull. There's so much less stress. It doesn't feel like a pig. It feels like a supercharged pig with 93 octane in it. So there's definitely a lot to gain when adding the Roush Phase 2 Supercharger, because this thing definitely made some impressive numbers, made an impressive stride with towing and hauling, especially in our real world test. At the end of the day, if you're spending a lot of time towing and hauling, it's gonna slow down the performance. So to make life so much easier, we added this Roush Phase 2 TVS blower, and this thing helped us so much getting up that ramp. It shed about 9 seconds off of our time going from 30 to 60, and it really just brings this to life. Well guys, if you enjoyed this one, if you enjoyed the build, you like seeing the real world testing, make sure you hit that subscribe button. We're doing a lot of cool stuff like this, events, builds, F-150s all day, every day. So if you like them, hit that button and keep it right here at AmericanTrucks.com. And we're out, baby. That's it. That's a wrap. Go home.